people can work anywhere. So anyway,
That's okay.
are we okay? Did somebody say something? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Kylah to introduce herself more in terms of her lifestyle, because the focus of this is, even though she lives in Costa Rica, it's not really on Costa Rica, it's about the lifestyle. But you're going to learn a lot about Costa Rica as well. And I know a lot of people are interested in Costa Rica. But I'd like to have Kylah talk a little bit about her life, and then I'm just going to launch into some questions. So Kylah, thank you for doing this call with us. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I really appreciate your time and your generosity of spirit coming on here. So just give us a little overview of what your life is like, and then I've got questions for you.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Kylah. I used to work for Jana. Got my start in politics and loved the hustle and bustle, and then moved to DC to continue working in politics. I lived in politics in DC. I worked in politics. I went to school in politics, and I was just kind of burnt out. I was also coming off the tail end of the Trump election, and so it was just exhausting and I was stressed. And so I booked a trip to Costa Rica, not intentionally. I've actually never had any intention of going to Costa Rica, and I travel quite a bit. It wasn't on the list of things that I needed to do. And I was Googling warm places to visit for like a spa or something to take care of my mental health. And it was coming up, Google was coming up with California, Arizona, spas, whatever. And then I just stumbled upon a random Google ad, and it was a surf retreat in Costa Rica for women.
Oh,
So I booked it. I showed up. A sketchy van arrived at the airport. It took me 3 hours to this place called Nosara, Costa Rica. And then on day 2 of the retreat, I said, I want to live here. It was
oh,
sort of like, I can't describe it until you've been to this town, but it's a very magical town, energetically, and it was very different to DC. There's no sirens, there's no helicopters flying around. It was everyone's barefoot in their bikini. I was just like, I have to move here. So I went back home to DC, packed up my apartment. My dad came up and brought a U-Haul, and we took myself and my cat back down to Colorado where my parents moved to. And a month later I was back, and I lived for 2 years. And I kept my job. I asked my company, I said, listen, my mental health is not good in DC. I'm moving to Costa Rica. Is that okay? And they said, yes, absolutely. And the rest is history. So I've kind of just turned my life into being a digital nomad. I traveled around South America for the last 3 months, and before coming back to Costa Rica just to live full time. And that's how I,
that's amazing.
yeah.
Because I think I remember that you were going to travel around Europe for a few months originally was your plan, right? A few months before, this was maybe during COVID or right towards maybe the beginning of COVID. I can't remember, but you were going to go to Europe. So it sounds like you just stumbled upon Costa Rica and you just fell in love with the lifestyle and just said, okay, I'm packing it all in. I'm going to Costa Rica. And I see you travel all over Latin America, so it's obviously a good base for that as well. So, okay, great. My first question to you was, how did you pick Costa Rica? And you've already answered that. It was kind of just a coincidence, but I mean, how were you ready in your life to give up what most people would consider the security of living in the US? I mean, do you think you have to be young and adventurous, or could anyone do that?
Oh, anyone can do it. Most of my friends here have brought their families here. I think once you come to Costa Rica, you kind of realize that the States is so high stakes, high stress. You tend to have decision fatigue there. Amazon comes to your door every 2 days or like
Or
three
every
hours later after you've ordered it. Yeah, the same day. I just realized, especially after living in Costa Rica and then going back to the States, that the States stresses me out, genuinely. There's something energetically with, when you're surrounded by people who are stressed all the time, who have to be somewhere in a hurry all the time, who have decision fatigue. it's exhausting on your body. And I
Well,
just
the
realized,
division also that I find that, I mean, I just don't want to be around MAGAs. Like, I'm just not interested in being around them, and I don't want to breathe the same air as them. Like, it feels unsafe to me.
yeah,
So I guess in Costa Rica, I mean, who knows the politics of everybody? Probably people aren't necessarily political there, but at least you're probably not around people who, want to deport immigrants and, put people in concentration camps, most likely. Um, so anyway, so I want to start with the visa situation because I prepared, and I will make sure I share again this list I prepared for everyone of visas around the world where you can get to become a digital nomad. Because you don't have a visa as a digital nomad, you're on a tourist visa. And from what you've explained to me, there's no reason you don't need a digital nomad visa. Costa Rica is cool. They don't care that you don't have one. They know that you are there because they see you coming in and out. Do you want to talk about the necessity for a visa or not?
yeah.
And you're just and what that looks like to not have a visa. Like, does it impact you? Do you have any problems with healthcare or with opening a bank account or any of the things that you might want to do, renting an apartment? Does it matter for any of that?
No, it doesn't. In Costa Rica, we kind of have this running joke around here that there are no rules. Um, I operate off of my tourist visa. It's 180 days. They actually recently changed it. It used to be 90, so 3 months. Mine's 180 days. That's 6 months out of the year. And by the time my 6 months is up, I'm usually either going home for Christmas to Colorado or going back to the States to get medicine for my autoimmune disease. So for me, it wasn't necessary to go and apply for a digital nomad visa that might be a year or 2 years or apply for residency. Um, I don't really want to spend the extra money each year to like have those visas or apply for residency. And when I can just go home at least once a year to get, after 180 days, super, it's super easy and it's
I
a
mean, can you
direct.
live there forever doing this, or do you need to
Yeah,
have permanent residency at some point?
yeah, you can live forever. My passport from the last 2 years has 10 plus Costa Rica stamps on it, and they don't seem to care. They just ask me where I'm going, how long I'm staying, and when my next flight is. They don't look at any specific airline ticket. And yeah, I just tell them and they say, hola, like bienvenidos, welcome, enjoy your stay.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I guess it's great to have people coming into the country who are earning money elsewhere and spending it in Costa Rica, right? It's good for the economy.
yeah. Um, yeah, and yeah, so it's super easy. And another option if you're up in the Guanacaste, the region, it's the Western Peninsula. We're about 4 hours away from the Nicaraguan border, so we call them border runs here. So you can easily just you take a day and you drive up to the border, you go through it, go through customs, come back across, and boom, done, go back home. And then you have another 180 days. So that's why I keep my tourist visa as is.
But just to be clear for people who maybe don't want to do that or don't like the lack of security, there is a Costa Rica digital nomad visa. And I think the requirement for the visa, off the top of my head, I want to say $2,500 a month that you need to earn in order to get it. I mean, can people live on $2,500 a month in Costa Rica?
Um, I would say you probably need more. But I'm saying that based on where I live. So I live in Nassau, Costa Rica, where
It's a
it's
more
like
expensive
it's
area,
a
right?
more expensive place. It's kind of probably a little bit less than California, but like DC prices. Which yeah, again, it's the most expensive place in Costa Rica. It's also, in my opinion, the best. So
There's
I
usually a connection between cost of
yeah.
living and how wonderful the place is, right? Um, so we had a question, which I don't see now, but it was, do you have to go to the US or can you just go anywhere? You can go anywhere, right? You just need to leave the country and come back in. You can go across the border, you can go, but I think what Kyla was saying is she goes home anyway for Christmas and probably at least once other time in the year. So even if she were traveling or she doesn't have to usually do a special run, she's usually just going home.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, we have someone coming in. So I noticed you talked about your cat Molly. And one of the huge challenges for me has been getting my dogs to Holland. Now my dogs are big, and one of them's very old and they're not crate trained. So that has been really a challenge for me to get them prepared and expensive to get them to come to Holland. Well, cheaper than hiring a transport company. It's 400 each for their ticket. And then they have to get a health check that's like $550 each. And then I've had to get crates for them and I'm having to get special bowls. And by the time you add all that up, it's probably about $1,200. And I got like free crates and really cheap crates, but it could be more. So what was it like bringing Molly with you? And what happens like if you're going traveling, what do you do with Molly? Because cats are different, aren't they, than dogs? They don't come with you, but
Yeah, cats are a little bit different than dogs and also a little bit cheaper to fly with. Molly is a traveling cat. She's an orange cat, feisty. She came from DC. She's moved from DC to Colorado to Texas to Costa Rica. When I flew her to Costa Rica, for cats, you usually pay, like, for instance, I fly United. It's a direct flight from Colorado to Costa Rica. It's $150 for her plane ticket. She goes underneath the seat. And then you have to find an accredited veterinarian. So in this, and I can send out a link to this event
is it the
for the
USDA? Is that what you mean, USDA? That's
it's
what I,
the US, yeah,
but
it's the
you have to
USDA.
go every time she comes or she's only come once.
She has to go, so your certificate with Costa Rica, I think, lasts for 30 days when you bring her from the States to Costa Rica. However, I stay more than 30 days. I live here. So I just have to repeat the same process from going back to the States if I bring her back. But if I go back to the States and I leave her here, I have such a big community that people usually stay with her or come visit her 2 or 3 times a day. But flying her here, yeah, you pay $150 for a plane ticket, give or take, depending on what airline you take. You have to get an accredited veterinarian, and it has to be an accredited veterinarian. All vets are not all
No,
accredited.
there's only
Um,
one in Fort Worth from what I,
yeah.
yeah.
So you can Google and it'll, the APHIS USDA will give you a list of vets in your area who can do the paperwork. And Costa Rica, I don't know about other countries, but Costa Rica, you have to have specific paperwork done 14 days prior to you leaving,
Yeah,
no earlier.
it's the same
So
in Holland.
yeah, so like some of her vaccines have to be done by that vet and written down with a date within 14 days of her departure. And then yeah, I stick her on a plane and I take a Xanax because it's hard on me as a mom to her and to deal with it and it's stressful and
Does she
um
nail the whole way?
I heavily sedate her.
Oh, okay, all right.
I've learned my lesson. So that's why it's stressful 'cause yeah, it's bad. But she gets here and she loves it and she just stays and when I travel to and from, she just stays with a friend.
Okay, thank you for that. Now healthcare for every American, and I rant about this every single week, so I'm going to do my very short rant. Healthcare in America is such a disaster. It's so expensive, it's so bad, and it's better in most places in the world, with the exception maybe of some less developed nations. It's much better. And now I know you are not, so you're on a tourist visa, so you're not entitled to the healthcare there. So how do you navigate the healthcare system and what does that look like?
So the way that I navigate it, well, there's two ways you can navigate it. I navigate it without having insurance here, only because I've learned that being out of a stressful place like the States, I never get sick here ever. I genuinely think it's something to do with like the stress and energy of the States and being sick. So one, I never get
I
sick.
believe that. Yeah.
So I never and if I do get sick, like I was telling Janet earlier, I've had dengue and I've, had to go to the doctor 5 days in a row, blood work, infusions, medicine. I paid 250 bucks max for all of that, just cash. Um, we have pharmacies
It's
here that
completely affordable like that. Like you wouldn't need insurance if something like a 5-day serious illness cost you $250, right?
having insurance in the States is actually more expensive than having no insurance here in Costa Rica. Now, I've looked into international health insurance. It's something that I'll probably get only because if something does happen and I have to go to the hospital or have to be,
In the States.
yeah, I want to make sure that I have it here at least because I don't want to be 100 grand in debt or whatever it may be for hospital bills here. But for your like generic, if you just need to go to the doctor because you're sick, if you need to get blood work done, if you need to go to the pharmacy, it's really cheap. Medicine is way cheaper here too. Pharmacists aren't out to take all of your money, so it's way cheaper.
Yeah. So you don't need insurance basically for healthcare in Costa Rica. You pay cash out of pocket and it's affordable.
For your like every day, like if you're just once in a blue moon, you have a respiratory infection, whatever. I don't think you need health insurance. I think it's safe to when you get here to get international health insurance. A lot of people here use Cigna International. I just have a problem with international health insurance because of my pre-existing condition. So it's hard for me to get that when I already have it and get on an international health insurance plan. Um,
Because
so
you
I
have US health insurance through your employer in the
yeah.
US. Yeah.
So
So
I go back to the States for anything major. And then for my everyday stuff here, it's cheaper than going to the doctor in the States.
yeah, sounds like a lot cheaper actually. Okay, so one of the things that you've talked about a lot is your community, building a community where you are. And now it could be the same in Costa Rica as it would be in London or Paris or South Africa, wherever you go, you want to build a community. What did that look like? How long did it take? Was it difficult to make friends? Are most people young who are like hanging out? Because you're young, I mean, compared to probably most people on the call, I'm guessing, you're probably a lot younger than most of us. I mean, is it something that older people, you think, do they find community easily there? So talk to me about building community.
Yeah. So where I live, we're part of the Blue Zone. So community is probably one of the most important things and for health wise, I think it's super important. And so community is a super big deal here. And I'd say I am only 27, but all of my friends are in their 40s and 50s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm like the baby of the town and
You're an old soul anyway.
I'm an old soul and I've got a lot of big sisters and brothers. So no, I think it's super easy to build a community in this town. This town that I live in, Nosara, is primarily a yogi and surf town. So just by having those two things that you can converse over and communicate over, that builds your community right there. And Costa Rica in general, my favorite thing about
In
this
Costa
place.
Rica.
Ooh, sorry.
Does somebody need to mute their self, mute themselves?
Thanks.
Okay.
One of my favorite things about Costa Rica is that you don't in the States, I feel like if you want to see a friend, you've got to plan 2-3 weeks a month in advance to see that friend for 2 hours. And here in Costa Rica, we just show up at each other's homes, and if you've got food on the table, we all share, and it's super lovely, and that's one of the reasons why I stay.
Okay, so community has been important, but it's been easy to build a community.
Super easy because I mean, when you choose a town, you'll navigate more towards expats naturally, and people who speak your language. And so here in Costa Rica, in Nosara specifically, it's just a bunch of expats. So we're all doing the same thing, working digitally, and
Okay, but did you learn Spanish? Did you need to learn Spanish?
I take lessons and I'm learning. I'm not great at it, but I can survive. You don't Here in Nosara, Costa Rica, I don't need to know it. Everyone speaks English here, even the locals. It's a lot of tourists come. It's one of the best places to surf in the world or learn how to surf in the world. So everyone knows English and speaks English.
Okay, but if you were living in a different town, you would have to speak Spanish and you would have learned it by now, probably. So, okay. So to talk about cost of living, we've heard about healthcare. Talk about, and if you can talk about not just the town you're in, it sounds like it's almost as expensive as DC or very similar because it's all expats, right? So what would you need to live on and how much would people typically pay to rent a house or that sort of thing?
Yeah. So after COVID, prices here kind of changed and skyrocketed because everyone wanted to be here. So for instance, I'll give you like an example. For my 1 bedroom apartment with washer and dryer, and it has a shared pool, I pay $1,400 a month for it.
That's still cheap by DFW standards.
It's like it's not terrible, but when you get into like bigger houses, I'd say like a 2 bedroom. It depends on where you are in town. Like it just depends on where you are in Costa Rica. If you're right in the middle of it all, I mean, you might pay $2,500 for a 1 bedroom. Um, and yeah, so I'd say it's pretty like on par with some places in the States. Just depending on where you live. I mean, when you get farther out of my town, a 1 bedroom casita is like maybe $800. Like, so it just depends on where you end up.
You can adjust your budget based on maybe living more like locals live, and that's probably true everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I drive a moto, a Honda Navi. It's a motorcycle essentially.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Is it like a
for gas,
Vespa, like a small?
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I like for gas, for instance, to fill that up, I fill it up once a week. I pay $3.
Wow.
Um, my
Wow.
budget for food each month as like a person who is very active and eats a bunch. My mom eats that I eat like a 13-year-old boy. I budget for like $700, $800 for groceries a month just for myself.
Well, so that's
Food's
kind of a lot. Yeah.
a lot. Food's expensive here. A lot of things are imported. So the stuff that is imported, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than you would see it in the States for sure.
And
Um,
restaurants, entertainment, what's that like?
Lots of restaurants here, lots of food. In my town, Nosara, you could just eat and drink and call that a vacation. There's just lots to eat, and the food is delicious. I hate going back to the States because my stomach immediately bloats when I eat anything in the States.
Yeah.
I could have a whole jar of milk here and be totally fine. Not fine in the States. But
Right.
yeah, food is way better here in
Because
general.
it's probably less hormones, less less factory farming. It's the food production in the States is so like commercial,
Yeah.
is so commercialized. Yeah. Yeah. So now what about infrastructure challenges? Do you have situations like your internet, your electricity, your internet goes out. You can't get through on a road to get to the airport. How far is the airport? What is the infrastructure like?
Well, it's a fun one. It's kind of like Mario Kart around here. Uh, infrastructure. So infrastructure is getting better. We get excited when we get a new paved road. Because
Right.
most of our roads are unpaved, dirt, potholes. When it rains, it all gets worse and it floods. And But infrastructure, yeah, it's getting better. Our roads are our main roads at least are all paved. So you're not messing up your car in that sense. But when you buy a car here, you have to take it to the mechanic every single month because you've got humidity, you've got salt, and you've got poor roads in some areas.
I mean, that
Like potholes like you've never seen potholes.
So, and you've traveled a lot to less developed countries because Costa Rica is one of the wealthier, more developed countries in Latin America. I mean, what would you say to people who are considering being a digital nomad and aren't sure that they can deal with, infrastructure being different? Like, is there a tech, like, what do you do to prepare yourself for that and to be okay with that?
I will say it just takes getting used to, especially after you're coming from the States when you have access to everything and nothing usually breaks and things get fixed super quickly. I will say that's like the beauty of this place. So our internet does go out, our water does go out. It always comes back, but you don't
Right.
ever. So I think when you come with that mindset, you eventually are okay with it. It was a big culture shock when I first moved here because I was absolutely pissed that I couldn't take a shower after the beach because the water just went out. Um, so you just get used to it. And then certain things that when you go back home to the States and people are complaining about something, and I'm like, why are you complaining about that? Like
Right.
that's
Right.
nothing.
Well, I
So
mean, don't forget, we lost electricity. Actually, we lose electricity all the time in Texas. It's gotten better, I
yeah,
would say. We've had fewer grid failures, but we're supposedly a first world country and we have had our
yeah,
electricity
yeah.
died, like a lot of people died. So it does happen. Yeah. Okay. Now politics. Like for me, I mean, the main reason for leaving is the politics. because I do think it's going to get dangerous in the States. I know not everyone agrees with me,
Girl
um,
who never used to work with her.
but can you, oh, Tiffany, your, can you mute, please? Okay, there you go.
Sorry?
So what's the politics like? Like how present is it? Are the, do you ever feel afraid either from the local politics or American politics coming into the division that we have in our country? Like, what's it like politically there for you?
I kind of, coming from someone who's a political nerd, I don't feel politics here at all. It's not something we typically talk about here. It's because we know that it's a very stressful thing, and
Mhm.
it's not something that's typically brought up here. I will say, with like the LGBTQ plus community, Costa Rica is super like liberal when it comes to that. So same-sex marriage is legal, same-sex adoption is perfectly legal. We have a pride association here in town. We have pride parades.
Sorry,
So
same-sex marriage is legal,
is legal.
and
Yeah.
you don't feel people have you can express yourself, you're not in any danger, you're perfectly accepted.
Nope. And it's because Costa Rica is very Catholic, and very heavily like focused on religion, and so that's something that's super cool. With that being said, the LGBTQ plus community feel safe here. Um,
Do you think
for
that's in Sarah or throughout everywhere?
I think it's throughout, yeah. Um, but in Nosara specifically, it's where we don't care what you look like, who you love. I think that's the beauty about being in this town. But so expats, I don't get to like vote and do that. However, the town that we live in, we're part of like a region, and our mayor is in Nicoya, which is like 2 hours away. So we kind of like locals and expats kind of govern themselves here essentially. We pay for some of our paved roads. People donate money, and that's how kind of we get things done here. So we don't really feel politics here. And I am an expat. I'm not talking from like a local standpoint. I have no idea what Ticos and Ticas feel from that perspective, but for expats, we're not really bothered by politics here. Um, yeah.
You don't have to hear what Trump is up to every 5 minutes, it sounds like.
No, it's actually really nice.
Yeah,
The
that sounds
news,
really nice. Yeah.
the news doesn't
I've been on a
blast.
news blackout for weeks because I just can't. So, so Monica asked about a Tico or a Tica. I actually learned that on our Costa Rica call a few weeks ago, is what Costa Ricans call themselves. The Tica would be the feminine version and the Tico is the male version. So, just as we're Americans, I guess we don't really have a nickname. Yanks, we could say we're Yanks, right? Or British people would say we're Yanks. Well, then they are Ticas and Ticos, but it's not derogatory. It's positive. Yeah. Um, so housing, again, there's no problem with you not having a visa. You can still get housing. The housing market there's housing readily available, it sounds like.
Yeah, we use most beach towns in Costa Rica operate off of like Facebook and WhatsApp. So we have WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups for housing. And you just message the owner and say, hey, I'm looking for a house. And they say, great. And you wire them money, and
And it's
yeah,
safe.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
totally safe. It's totally normal. People from the States, even including my mom, are like, are you sure you should be sending that person money? And I'm like, it's fine. It's a small town, is what we do. Like it's normal here. For my last apartment, I asked him, I said, are you cool with my cat coming? He's like, yeah, sure. I wired him money, haven't even met the guy. Like, so it's normal here. But yeah, we operate off of
People
like
take your damn money over here.
and WhatsApp, yeah.
Okay, so can you talk about when you were traveling? I know you had a big tour through Latin America. I got to see. Can you put your Insta handle in the chat for people so they can follow you if they're interested? Kylah has a lot of trips, and she has a lot of beautiful Instagram posts. And it's really worth watching. So if you want to follow her, that's her Instagram. I don't know, you're not actually a content creator, are you? Are you somebody who makes a living as a content creator? No. I wasn't sure.
No.
Okay. You just
No.
you just have a good content. Yeah. Okay. All right. So are there any hardships being away from the States? Like if you were like you've been there now, what is it, 2 years? You've been living abroad 2 years. Like, do you miss the States? I mean, I know you miss your family, but they come visit you and you see them. But are there any hardships or the things that you miss about being in the States?
No. No, I don't. I think at the end of the day, like the reason why I stay abroad is because when I go back to the States after traveling so much, everybody's just so stressed and so uptight and so worried about things that that energy is exhausting. And I don't miss much about it. I do, of course, miss my family. However, when I found Costa Rica, which my family would totally understand this if they're watching, but my family are not the people that really fill up my cup anymore. They make me happy, and I love visiting them, and they come and visit me, and they're everything, but like it's not what fills up my cup. My cup is filled when I'm here in the jungle. There's low stakes. It's not stressful. I walk around barefoot everywhere. I have a coconut in the morning for breakfast. I
Wow.
go down to the beach and you wake up to monkeys, and that to me it makes me happy and fills my cup up, and I'm less stressed and more healthy when I'm here. So there's not much that I miss about the States, and I just no, not at all.
And I guess in the world that we live in today, it's easier to feel very connected to people through chat, through social media, through all the ways that we connect to people wherever they are, right? Like it's not the same as I remember when I was first living abroad, we wrote letters. I mean, that's how long ago it was. You wouldn't make a phone call because it was so expensive.
Yep.
Um, but you would write a letter and you would get the letter like a week later or even longer. And so a lot had changed by then.
Yeah.
And then, now we're at a place that you're constantly connected with people who live elsewhere. So it maybe the tendency to be lonely or to miss things doesn't happen, maybe.
No, it doesn't. And community, like I said, community is such a big deal here in Costa Rica that you always have help. Um, yeah, you always have help, and you always have someone willing to do something for you or help you with something, or if your car breaks, take you to the mechanic or whatever. I think the only hardship that I truly face here would be with my pre-existing condition, going back to the States to make sure I have medicine, because insurance can only give you a certain a certain amount of medication at a time, and I have to kind of plan
And
that
you
out.
don't get that medicine in the state, I mean, in Costa Rica?
I could, however, I would have to have insurance in Costa Rica to get it. And the way that Costa Rica insurance works with medication is that you have to pay for the actual medication before insurance reimburses you. So I would have to pay 8 grand out of pocket every eight
Oh
weeks if
my
I wanted to.
goodness. Wow.
And I don't want to put all my trust in that. So I just go back to the States, or I have people come and bring me my medicine.
So not specific to, I'm going to ask my last question, then I'm going to throw it open to anybody else who wants to ask questions. We're going to just open it up. But not specific to Costa Rica, but just to being a digital nomad, because you could be a digital nomad anywhere. What is the number one lesson that you've learned as a digital nomad that you think has that has strengthened your life, and that you would tell other people to look out for if they considered being a digital nomad?
Oh gosh. I definitely think it has allowed me to get to know myself better. I was a very strong, independent woman and I still am, but was very no emotions, just got shit done. Worked really hard when I lived in DC and in the States. And um, when I moved to Costa Rica and when I kind of became a digital nomad and started moving around, I started learning more about other people and myself, especially because I do it alone. So I sit with myself quite often in my own thoughts, and I've had the chance to just learn more about me. And you kind of realize how much more you can do when you step away from your community, your home, and you go and build something for yourself that's outside of your comfort zone. Um, yeah, so I've learned so much about me that no one can ever take away now. And now I feel like I can just basically do anything I want versus staying in the States and kind of being constricted.
We've got some great questions in the chat. So Connie, actually there was one question above that is how are the storms? You did talk about the rain, or was that you and me talking privately? I can't remember about the rain. So tell us about the weather and of course, weather is a concern in lots of places where digital nomads are typically going to.
Yeah. So in Costa Rica, we've got 2 seasons, rainy season, dry season. Rainy season is from like May to November. Um, and we get heavy rain. It's not your typical, sprinkle every single day. It's like when it rains, it pours like monsoon like here. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure to help with that if it rains for 20 days straight. So certain roads flood and you can't get to the grocery store sometimes. But you kind of just learn to live with it. I love the rain. Rainy season is actually my favorite. It's quiet, it's green, everybody leaves, and you kind of just get time to recharge and focus on yourself before high season comes. Um, so yeah, we don't get hurricanes, which is really nice. We just get tropical,
It's great. Yeah.
tropical depressions. Yeah.
So we got two related questions. Connie wants to know what you do, what your profession is. And then Deb wants to know, are there resources for finding remote roles in the US? I kind of think like most roles these days can be remote. I see on LinkedIn, most jobs are remote, although they do sometimes want you to live in the area in case there are meetings, right? So what do you do and why can you do that remotely? And how do people find remote jobs that allow them to be digital nomads?
Yeah. So when I first moved here, I was still working in DC. Um, I just simply asked my boss, I said, can I please do my job online abroad? I can't be in DC anymore for my mental health. And she said, yes, absolutely.
And was
Now
all your work remote then at that point, just in DC or?
it was hybrid. So after COVID, we went fully remote and then I started going in once a week. But we just kind of shifted my role into where someone else did the part that was hybrid, and then I just stayed remote. I currently am an executive admin for a company called High Impact Coaching. My best friend lives here, so he offered me the role, and it's fully remote, so I don't have to. I go into San Diego for a live event that I host twice a year, and that's it. But there are so many, like Jana said, there's almost every job these days has a remote option or can be remote or
Depends on your profession, right? Like of the people that you know who are remote or who are digital nomads, what kind of jobs do they normally have and how do they get them?
I'd say as like a digital nomad, we aren't so worried as we're not so career focused.
Right.
Uh, you can be like I have aspirations of finding like building my own business and blah blah blah, and I can do it fully remote. But I feel like most of us are not career focused. That's one of the reasons why I moved from DC. So if you're not career focused and you just want to make money and your career is not your purpose essentially in life and traveling is or moving abroad or living somewhere else besides the States, you can there's hundreds and thousands of jobs for you out there just so you can open a computer in the morning, do your thing, and then close it at 4 p.m., go to the beach, go explore, go have new food, go explore on the weekends. So
That's
there's
wonderful.
it's the best. Yeah.
So, by the way, when I moved to Holland, all of my clients so far have said, that's no problem. You just keep doing your work. But I've been working from my house for, 10 years. My work has always been remote. I do have to sometimes go and do trainings in person. So I suspect that could become a hassle if I need to do in-person trainings. But if I fly back to the States to do a training. I think most of us probably, if you work from home, that job could be a digital nomad job, essentially.
Essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you have a lot of meetings with people, in-person meetings. But
Yeah.
Zoom has really changed things. Zoom and COVID, actually, I think are the two things that changed
Oh,
things.
COVID was a big pivot. Yeah.
Yeah, big.
And most
Yeah.
things, most things you can do remote and it's no problem usually.
Okay, so I've got a question. You mentioned the internet going out. I'm wondering how long it stays out. give or take, given many of us would work remotely. So how big of a challenge is that when you have infrastructure issues like internet going out?
Depends. So most of us have backup batteries. So once your internet goes out, you've got like 45 minutes to have Wi-Fi. Most of the time it's just like a flutter, it kicks off and it goes, but then your Wi-Fi system has to reset. So it usually doesn't stay out for long. There's been only a couple times where it's stayed out for more than 2 hours, or the town will be like, hey, on this day we're doing a 7-hour thing where there'll be no power for the day and we're going to fix wires and whatever. And so you're aware, but all of the hotels and what I've as being a digital nomad, you get crafty.
Yeah.
Every hotel in town has fiber optic like Wi-Fi and backup batteries and stuff like that. So they all have Wi-Fi when the power goes out for long stretches of time. So I'll just take my computer and headphones and go and work at a coffee shop that has it or a hotel that has it. And just
Yeah,
get my
you work around it. We have the same thing here. I mean, that happens. Like AT&T is probably the most reliable, and my internet goes out sometimes. And it's always when I don't when I really need my internet to not,
Oh,
you know.
absolutely. It only absolutely. I mean, that happens here. It's like when I need it
Yeah,
the most, an important
exactly.
interview, I'm scrambling to put on clothes, get on my moto, go find a hotel and get on that meeting. But but
So
those are
what,
some of the
go
things you have
ahead.
to deal with. Those are just some of
Yeah.
the things that like
Yeah, you have to be flexible, it sounds like.
yeah.
You really have to be more prepared to be flexible, it sounds like, as a digital nomad. But I also think like if you're really high powered, it could be a problem. So like it's probably better for people who aren't in a really pressured role where they have to be online like 100% for, 8 hours a day or something.
I mean, my boss, he is in like a pressured role. Like for instance, his Wednesdays are, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. He's in client meetings. Like that's we have, workshops on Wednesdays and he needs to be online. And from the days that he power goes out, whatever, there's co-working spaces here. So he'll just go sit and he'll rent a space and he'll have his own office for the day and it's totally fine. So there's just ways that you have
There
to
are ways around it.
like the
Yeah.
price you pay for living in paradise, essentially.
Right.
You just have to.
It doesn't seem that big of a price. Yeah. So again, we have another question. I think people want to know how do they get a job like you have where they can work remotely? Now I'm going to say I have seen a lot of jobs on LinkedIn and about half of them seem to say remote.
Yeah.
So is there a specific source for remote jobs or do you just need to go look for a job that can be remote? How does it work?
Um, so I'm kind of unfamiliar with the process. I've had the privilege of just knowing people, and
Well,
they've
networking is important everywhere, right? Like
yeah,
that's a
networking it's
jobs.
important. I've had that privilege, so I've never had to have a formal interview, which is nuts. So, but I will say you can, and I've done this before, you can Google just remote jobs, and usually LinkedIn pops up. There's several websites dedicated to remote work. I
Oh, what
can,
are those jobs, those
I
websites?
don't know them off the top of my head, but I will make a note for myself to find them, and
Post
then
it, can I post
post it
the,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay. So Angela is again asking more questions about remote jobs. So I know this. So if you go on to LinkedIn and you run a search and you say, I am an executive assistant or I am an advertising creator or whatever, you put in your job title, you search by location, remote is one of the options. And you get a bunch of, and you look at the actual job listing and it'll say something like remote, but you need to be in the New York metropolitan area because you're going to have client meetings sometimes or whatever. Some are 100% remote. Usually they say 100% remote, which means you could do it from anywhere. So you have to, if your company will not make your job remote, which is what most people do. Most people, their companies allowed them to be remote where they were already. Usually if they have a special expertise, like my job, I can do it remotely, like, well, at least 95% of the time it's remote. So it just happens that way. But if you want to go find a remote job, I would say look on LinkedIn for jobs that you click the remote button as one of the search criteria and jobs will come up. And I would say almost like most jobs I see these days are remote because people
Yeah.
aren't, unless you're in industries that are specifically going back to the office. Most companies are not going back to the office because people are happier working at home, it seems. So
You get more done, like you get way more done statistically. Like
way
company,
more.
you're way more productive at work than you are in or at home than you are in an office.
Yeah, I certainly, yeah. Yeah, Connie mentions, I've heard this from a couple people in the last few days that their jobs are remote, but because they work in industries like defense, or related, they're not allowed to work outside the US. Well, that is not going to work. Like you're going to have to change jobs or you're going to tell us that nobody's going to know.
Well, not to get you in trouble or anything, but I'm kind of a rebel for the things that I really want in life, which is to be remote and not live in the States. A VPN is another option. So like
Yes, that's true.
for instance, like when I was still working in politics and I was filing paperwork with the government for our campaigns and their finances,
Yeah.
I would just change my VPN to be in Denver or DC. And then so that way my filings showed that I submitted it from DC, but I'm really sitting on the beach. Like, so that's like an option. I know that's a little bit challenging with, defense jobs and government jobs because you have a government computer and they can track it, but
They know where your computer is. Yeah.
they know where your computer is, but you can, for most things, you can set up a VPN. My dad's talked about it. He's like, this company won't let me leave, but this person is semi okay with it, so I can get a VPN and make it look like I'm in Dallas, whatever. So, yeah, VPN is another option.
And one of this question comes up a lot, teachers. So I know a lot of people who are teachers who want to move abroad. And I don't see a lot of teaching jobs other than because of the language mainly, other than English teaching, which really doesn't pay very well from what I've seen. Like there are people who have been making a living their entire career as English teachers. They start schools, English language schools, all over the world, that whole segment of English language teaching. And then there are people who work at international schools, and there definitely are websites that specialize in hiring teachers at international schools. I've seen those online. But other than that, is there like could a teacher, a social studies teacher, for instance, move to Costa Rica and get a job as a teacher?
Yeah, you could probably get a job here. We have private schools and schools. I would say you're not going to get paid as much as a teacher here like you do in the States. However, I have a friend who I will text after this and give you more resources later. She lives here full time, and she has a teacher, like is a teacher. She doesn't teach anymore, but she works for a school in North Dakota. And they hire online teachers. And so she is also looking to get her certificate in I don't know the exact term for it for teachers, but it's where you make curriculum and you can do that all online.
Yeah, I've seen
so
that actually. Yeah. And
yeah.
by that even counts, I've seen that counts as passive income for some reason in some countries. Like I read somewhere that is like considered passive income in Portugal, where it's actually a job, because the requirements for passive income visas tend to be lower than than the income requirement for digital nomad visas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Deb put in a great resource. Thank you, Deb, for that. On lifestyle in general, not specifically jobs, is reddit.com stroke r stroke digital nomad. And I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna copy that and put that. I will be making a list of all of the resources probably tomorrow or in the next couple of days, that Kylah mentioned or that people mentioned on here, and I will include those resources on there. Let's see. I found some American schools overseas will hire Americans. Some pay pretty decent, but then also the cost of living is lower. School is national. What qualifies as passive income? I read something, and I don't know where I read it, that passive income under the Portuguese visa included curriculum, writing curriculum. I don't know why that was considered passive. So the definition of passive is not well defined. So because you could be a day trader and you could work 8 hours a day at your desk, and yet that is considered passive income because you're an investor. So and if you have a business and you are managing that business, sometimes that's considered passive income. And for people who know about, we talked about Portugal specifically. So Portugal has, I think the passive income requirement is only like $1,000 a month, but the digital nomad requirement is like $3,500 a month. And you don't really need $3,500 a month to live in Portugal. So some people are figuring out how to use the passive income. And one of the things I just happened to read somewhere was that that a curriculum writing somehow was passive income. I don't know why, because I think it's, you have to make the argument that this is passive income because maybe it only takes you, like you're relying on your knowledge and not like physical sitting down and working or something. I mean, the definition of passive income is very loose, I guess is what I was saying. So,
Another like cool thing that I've learned about income here, is that if you are working for an American company, you can actually apply with the IRS. I think it's called foreign earned income exemption or something along those lines. I can also include it in like the resources that Jan and I send out. But you can basically make your income exempt from taxes. So
wow.
so like, but you have to move, there's pros and cons to it. You have to basically make sure you have everything away from the States. So like your healthcare away from the States, like just everything not, so it doesn't taint the whole thing and your taxes and the IRS and whatever. But and you can only go back to the States for 35 days out of the year. So you've got like limits on how often you can be in the States versus like where you're actually living abroad. And if you meet those requirements, you can earn your income from the States, exempt from taxes.
I'd never heard of that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay. Okay, well, we're just about to wrap up. Does anybody have a final question? Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. I put the spreadsheet again in the chat, and I will put it in the resources again. I did a search. Now, not all of the information. Oh, we got some more. Okay, yes. How do you do banking? Actually, that's a really good question. How does banking work?
Yeah. So anyone, well, in Costa Rica specifically, you can, as an expat, you can open a bank account. Anyone can.
Okay.
So that's super easy. Like I said, Costa Rica is so just chill. You walk up to the bank, you give them your passport, voila, you've got
A
it.
lot of countries you cannot, well, like
Yeah,
without proper living visas, you
yeah.
could not open a bank account.
No, so if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I can just walk into the bank and get a thing. I have only American bank accounts. Um, most things you pay US dollar or Costa Rican colones, and I can just go to the ATM and get cash if I need to. But everything here is Apple Pay, and I use my American bank. I
And
don't
you
have a
don't
problem.
spend a fortune in conversion fees. It's based on
Um,
the dollars. The colon is based on the dollar.
Yeah, so yeah, Costa Rican, yeah. So I don't pay conversion fees because I have an Apple credit card. Apple credit cards don't charge international transaction fees. My Wells Fargo card does. So like if I spend something on my Wells Fargo card, I'm gonna get like a $5 fee every time. If I take money out of the ATM using my Wells Fargo card, which you have to do, I can't do that on my credit card. I have like a little small fee, which is it's not terrible. So that's why I use a Apple credit card and I just Apple Pay everywhere I go.
Great. Thank you very much. And then we had one final question about, will we be covering other countries? Absolutely. So basically what's happening, we've already covered Portugal, Costa Rica as a country, all the different visa types, not just digital nomad, and also how do you buy property, and how do you retire. We did Mexico. We have the Netherlands DAFT visa coming up next week, which is also a kind of a digital nomad visa in the sense that if you are a freelancer working in the US, making your money in the US, you can go to the Netherlands and there's actually no income. Right now, there's no minimum income requirement, although the Netherlands is more expensive. I'm looking to put together a Germany program. Probably that will be in February. And I'm doing a Spain. Spain is the last one of this year. We're doing Spain. Spain is a big, I believe Spain has digital nomad, but for sure has what's called the non-lucrative visa, which means you can't work in the country. And I don't remember if that's also a digital nomad or if there's a separate digital nomad, but the person who's speaking is a real expert on all the visas, so we'll find out. And there are recordings of all those because I'm really struggling with figuring out how to get this onto Facebook Live recordings. I usually end up having to share them from my personal page. I'm recording this whole thing today, and then I'm going to post it onto YouTube. Right now, I have pinned a post at the top of my resource page that has links for all of the recordings that we've done so far. This is our 5th call now. And I will keep doing these as long as people are interested in these subject matters. And just to be clear, this is just a labor of love for me because I'm very worried about what's going to happen to those of us or those people who stay in the States. This is not a business. I'm not I'm not trying to make money off of this. I just want to help people get out of the country, if to safety, because I do believe it's going to be unsafe. So you know, we will continue to do this as long as there's an interest, and I will continue to help people figure out how to move abroad. Let's see, is there a way to access previous? You can access them from the resource page. That's my public profile, which is also just the Jana Sanchez is the name, the Jana Sanchez. It's my old campaign page. And then you can do it at the top, the pinned one are the 4 recordings we've had. I will add this one to it, and I will put them on YouTube. Starting from this one, I will put them on YouTube. And yes, Kylah, thank you so much for your generosity of spirit. I'm so happy to see you thriving. I mean, you were always amazing, a campaign worker and great person. And thank you for sharing everything with everyone that you've learned. And if people want to contact you with questions, can they message you through Instagram, or how would they contact you?
Yeah, just shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook Messenger, and I'll happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Okay.